All right, everyone, welcome to this live replay. We will be discussing the Level 2 Readworks and Whole Phonics partnership. So as you come on in, be sure to follow the notes in the chat. Be sure to introduce yourselves and let folks know where you're joining from, and we will get started very soon. All right, everyone. Welcome to the live replay. This is Teaching Syntax to Beginning Readers, a reading writing connection using decodable text and ReadWorks articles. A few housekeeping notes for you as you settle in. You are muted, your video is off, and that will be the remainder. That will remain for the duration of today's webinar. Please interact with the icons on the right side of your screen. There's the poll icon, the chat icon, and the ask a question icon. So please take a moment, introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from, the grade levels you work with. Please interact with the poll question at the right side of the screen. And as with any webinar, the chat can get very busy. And so if you have a question, we certainly wouldn't want it to be missed. So click on the Ask a Question button on the right side to make sure that we can address any questions that you have. And as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, and you'll receive a copy of that recording in the email address that you used to register.
Hi, I'm Nancy Eberhart. I am a content literacy consultant and the co-author of the Literacy How Professional Learning series with Margie Gillis. But in this context, I have the privilege of being the matchmaker and introducing Whole Phonics with Readworks, which has led to this partnership.
And I'm Tamika Reece, Senior Learning Partnerships Project Manager at Readworks, and I've had the pleasure of bringing the Level 2 partnership to life on the Readworks website.
Hello, I'm Jill Lauren. I'm a learning specialist and author. I am grateful to be here. Thank you, Tamika and Nancy, for this exciting experience creating this level 2 material, much of which came from the syntax book that you see below. So we're excited to share all of it with you today.
Awesome. And now let's take a look at the agenda for today's session. We'll tell you a little bit more about the history behind this wonderful partnership between ReadWorks and Whole Phonics. And then we're going to dive right in and talk about the role of syntax in reading comprehension, as well as the research. And then we'll give you an overview of the amazing resources that we have available on the Whole Phonics web pages. We will walk you through a demo of how you can locate everything that you need with a lot of details, and then there will be time at the end for questions. And so, for anyone who's not familiar with ReadWorks, ReadWorks is a nonprofit. It's a very unique nonprofit in the ed tech space. We provide K-12 teachers with resources for teaching reading comprehension. This is all free, there's no paywall. And ReadWorks focuses on two important goals: helping students grow background knowledge and vocabulary while they're engaged in effective reading practice. The scientific study of reading is the bedrock of our world-class content, teacher guidance, and curricular supports that enhance teacher effectiveness, resulting in improved student achievement. And if you're still not familiar or you don't rely on ReadWorks often, there are a ton of resources available on the website. So just take a quick look at this list. I'm not going to list them off for you, but if there's anything that you're curious about on this list, please take a look at the website and explore the teacher guide to learn more.
So let's talk about this partnership. And it got its start initially with what we're calling level one. And what this partnership allowed to happen was to introduce some decodable text to the ReadWorks website. And conversely, it allowed for whole phonics to add informational background knowledge to the stories in level one of whole phonics. And that is what is represented by this animal kingdom unit, which we call level one.
So level one was successful, and we decided to move forward with a level two that has a different focus. You can see the level two covers the digraphs, and in this level, we are working on two main goals. The first one is similar to level one, to enhance our decodable books by adding background knowledge through read alouds. And the second one is very specific and very exciting. It's to develop syntax level comprehension or sentence level comprehension, excuse me, through syntax instruction based on both the decodable books and the corresponding articles, which is what we will show you today.
And so I just wanted to provide a quick overview for what exactly is included in this partnership. There are many resources that are available to you for free. And so let's start with the whole phonics decodable text. There are 4 free whole phonics decodables that are available to you on the level 2 webpage. They also are going to, we also provide a teacher guide, answer guide, and syntax activity templates for each of those decodables, as well as the topically connected knowledge building ReadWorks passage. And just taking a deeper look into what's included, I mentioned that topically connected knowledge building passage. What's also amazing is that these passages include a step read, which we'll tell you a little bit more about in a bit, but it's an easier to decode version of that knowledge building article. The main passage is written at listening level. We encourage you to use these passages for read alouds, and they also include vocabulary activities to support comprehension. And then we offer a wide list of teacher guidance materials. So for each of the whole phonics decodables and the knowledge building passages, you are going to have access to teacher guides and answer guides, as well as helpful templates to support your students' work in constructing sentences to support their comprehension of the text.
One thing I want to add is that level two is united through interviews with 15 different people who you might meet in your community. And that is the overarching theme in our community. And what we did is for every whole phonics decodable, we interviewed someone who was related to either a character or an incident in the book. So for example, in A Sick Rock, these Nick and Meg visit a vet. So we interviewed a real vet. So we're bringing, real world knowledge to the decodable books. And those articles, as we've been saying, are listening level. Thanks,
And
Tamika.
And I'd also like to add that we provide a general template that can be used with other high quality fiction and nonfiction texts. So as you learn more about the function behind these templates, I do want you to also consider how these templates could be used across other texts.
Yes, thank you. And that's something you'll be hearing us mention throughout this webinar. And now Nancy's going to lead us through some of the important research that drove our decision making when we created these materials.
So let's start by orienting ourselves to where is syntax in the simple view of reading formula. And there's the formula, which is word reading times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. And the science of reading has had us focused a lot on the word reading. But what we're going to illustrate today or discuss today is that there's also a lot of information about syntax as part of language comprehension. So let's take an example, Jill. So we're pretty familiar with the fact that in word reading, we have letters for which we learn to associate the sound that goes with it or the sounds, and that we can, by arranging those letter sound symbol associations, build words. And that's how we get to our the words that we can decode. And we can also illustrate with children that we can rearrange those letters and get different words. So there's this flexibility or of using the sound to spelling correspondences. But we haven't talked as much historically about a comparable building block of language comprehension. So let's take a look at how this works with the first, let's click, there we go. The language comprehension building block is the sentence. And so when you're thinking about syntax, sort of think synonymously that we're talking sentences. And one of the basic sentence formulas is who did what to whom. That is the meaning sequence that we are anticipating in our language, first in spoken language, and then it's what we need to teach children to anticipate in written. We conventionally call these subject, predicate, and direct object. And then we can see that pattern, in fact, in this little paragraph repeats. We see the green, the woodpecker, the feathered driller, and the last word, he. That is the who or what in all of the sentences and relate to each other. And then we repeat similarly with the did what, the orange, the words in orange, and then the words in blue are the direct objects. So why is attention to sentence learning important? Is that that's the building block of text. Those sentences are one by one adding up to the meaning of text. So let's go on. So what is syntax? Well, it simply is, not so simply, one of the dimensions of language dealing with the arrangement of words, phrases, and clauses. And that is what we want to help our students understand. And this knowledge, as we just saw, can contribute to comprehension of text. As we've, for a long time, we've focused a lot on how much we know about the code learning process. But Shanahan in this quote points out that we also know a lot about syntax and its contribution to comprehension. In fact, the more students know about sentences, the better their comprehension is. Excuse me. Similarly, we've come to learn that there's a predictive value that the more students understand syntactic awareness early on by third grade, it predicts their level of comprehension in subsequent grades. So this is something that has value and importance in our instructional planning. Next slide, please.
Hold on. Whoops. There we go.
So Cheryl Scott, who is the author of this quote, I think said it really well, that if a reader cannot derive meaning from an individual sentence that make up the text, it's going to be a major obstacle to text level comprehension. So if our goal is to have students read more complex text, we have to establish their understanding of the individual sentence. So One other aspect of this is that there's been kind of a conventional wisdom or thought that we start by teaching kids to decode accurately and automatically, and then we move on to comprehension or sentence level work. What we're coming to understand is that we really need to begin starting earlier with the sentence level skills along with our code work. And that is part of what we are advocating through this partnership today. So, where can we begin? Keeping in mind that children come to school already with a great facility with using syntax because they're talking, most are. And through that process, they've learned to name things. That's one of the first things they do. They point and name the objects in their world. So that's where we start with syntax instruction when it comes to reading and writing. We talk about the namers, or what we call the who's. Conventionally, we refer to them as nouns. We also then talk about what those who's and what's do, those actions or the did what's, and we conventionally refer to those as verbs. So once we have words that students can decode, we can begin to help them distinguish between those that name and those that are actions. And so here's an example of some decodable words. We can sort, go ahead, Jill, that's fine. We can sort them into the people, places, things, or just, we could just have them be namers and actions. And then what happens, we discover, you may be thinking, well, some of those words maybe could be both. They could be a namer and an action, which is why these are color coded to show those that could be both. And so one of the things that happens through addressing syntax and starting to talk about the function of words is we let kids in on a very important fact, which is many words have multiple meanings and multiple jobs. And then we can show them in the end here how, the next slide, how many of these really can be both. And you may be saying, oh, I know that man could also be an action and cave could also be an action. Yes, and I think depending on the sophistication of the language of your students, you can put them in the both column too. So once we have these two components established, we can begin to build base sentences, namely the simple sentence that you see here. So if we have man and bike, we could have the man bikes, and there we have it, our simple sentence.
So I'm excited to share these next steps with you because people think that syntax is this complex, scary topic, and we're going to show you how you can lead your students to creating simple sentences. And once they understand the basis for a simple sentence, that's when all the fun begins with adding on, which comes later. But we'll show you these very organized steps to creating these simple sentences. And again, this comes from the syntax book that Margie and Nancy wrote. Margie and Nancy, sorry about that. And we'll go through the steps right now. So we're going to show you how this works with both a decodable book and the listening level authentic text that's available, both being available through the ReadWorks partnership. And I think it's important for us to emphasize that any text can be turned into content for syntax development. These steps that we're going to show you can be applied to any text. So this is a pretty powerful activity. And as it says, can be woven into all language experiences. So, sometimes when we ask kids, well, what's a sentence? Tell me what a sentence is. We often hear, oh, well, a sentence has a capital and a sentence has a period. But that isn't really what a sentence is. It's good that they know that, but we need to teach them how to think about sentences in the way that Nancy described so that they can start thinking along those lines while they're reading. So we're going to begin with the who and the did what. Exactly what you saw Nancy illustrating is what we do. And we'll read a sentence, like the first sentence on this page. Meg ran to get Zach and his van. And we'll ask, who is the who in this sentence? And what did Meg do? Meg ran. Let's read the next sentence. The kids and the duck get in the back of the van. Who's the who? The kids and the duck. What did they do? Get in. And finally, the last sentence, Zach zips to the vet. Who's the who? Zach. What did Zach do? Zach zips. I do want to explain this on this page, that format works perfectly. We don't write consistently in the same syntactical format for every sentence, as you all well know. So we'll be directing students to sentences that fit this formula for now, so they learn to be looking for the who and the did what. What we're going to do is describe 4 different templates to show you how we get to that point of teaching those concepts. In template A, you'll see a word sort. Template B, we're talking about building sentences. Template C is adding the direct object or the receiver of the action. And the same thing in template D with the addition of creating sentence summaries. In general, our goal is to get to that pattern that Nancy discussed earlier about the who and the did what, and who's the receiver of the action. And you'll be hearing that we're talking throughout these lessons about how words function. We're not classifying them, nouns, verbs. We are looking to make this as meaningful as possible for those little guys, because that's how they learn best. So let's take a look at activity number 1, which is a word function sort. So if we're going to ask students to look for the who and the did what, we need to make sure that they understand that. For some kids, this will come easily. For others, you'll need to have a moment where you walk around the classroom and kids, look at different, or you talk about different who's in the classroom, or then you talk about different actions, the did what. So you know your students, but the goal of this activity is to discuss the distinction between a who and a did what. On the website, you're going to see this image. To teach this first activity, you'll look at the teacher guide that's corresponding to a sick rock, and that's what it looks like. And then you're going to need a template, which is, as you can see here next to number 1, it says template A. Here is template A. So everything is written and organized for ease of use. So let's look at how this activity unfolds. At the bottom of the activity, you'll see a word bank, and the goal is to go through those words with your students. They should be reading to you. These are all decodable words from the book, so they should be reading to you. And you're going to go through and you're going to read the steps, and then eventually it'll become second nature to you, but it's all explained in the teacher guide. And as you can see, it says, explain that this story, A Sick Rock, tells us about people or animal characters. These are the who words. Stories also tell us what actions the characters do, like jump or run. These are the did what words. And then we're going to point out the word bank, and we're going to ask if the word is telling us who or did what. That's number 3. Have the students write the word in the correct column. So it's a simple sorting task to make sure that they can determine the functionality of these words, that they can determine what is a who and what is a did what word. Okay. Once they do that, they can also look at other words and fill them in throughout the rest of the book. And what we've done is we've listed in our answer guide, and you'll see that's listed also in the on the website. We've listed a number of words that are who words and did what words, just to make it easier for you as teachers to know some of the options that are in the book as we send kids to, as it says in number 6, students can work independently or in pairs to find more words to sort from a sick rock. And there's the answer guide. So that's activity 1 corresponding to template A. Activity 2, now it starts to get fun because now that we know how to identify these different words and their function, we could start to build sentences. So back to looking at the web page, you'll see the sick rock. You're looking for your teacher guide. There's activity 2. We're looking for a different template, as it says next to number 1, template B, and there's template B. Okay, let's walk through the steps. So with template B, if you're using a smartboard or in a small group setting, they've got their template, and now you're asking students to turn to page 1 in a sick rock, and they're going to read the second sentence, and they're going to identify the who and the did what, and they're going to write that down. So you could see on the template, Nick tags Meg, and then you could see the who and the did what in number 3 where it says Nick tags. And you then do that the same thing for page 7, and there's 2 sentences there. Okay, so we're filling out the who and the did what. That's going to be familiar to them because you've taught that through template A. Now, check your answers. Using this is number 5 now, using the bottom half of the worksheet, write the who on the dotted line and the did what tags, and tell students that a who and a did what make a sentence. So that's direct instruction, very explicit. And then you're putting a period after to show the end of the sentence, and you're guiding students to build more sentences. You'll do those sentences together, build those, and then you can pass out the book and have them find more. Again, there's an answer guide, same as for activity number 1. There are the pages and the sentence numbers where that sentence format of the who and did what can be found. And so number 7, you can hear from my excitement about this activity. Learning how to write simple sentences is an important step in understanding the sentence as a basic unit of meaning. This is a big deal. Collect sentences that your students have written and display them around the classroom. And for those of you who think your students understand what they're reading because their decoding seems relatively fluent, and then you ask questions and they have the look, this activity, highlighting their awareness to how a basic sentence is created, and then adding perhaps a visualization component. Like, what is Nick doing? Oh, he's tagging. Can you see Nick in your mind? Can you see him tagging Meg? Like, activating that imagery is really what all good readers are doing. They're seeing these images as we read. So this is a very powerful activity. And just to remind you that once they've learned how to do this, while you're reading, even if you're not doing a syntax activity formally for the day, you can just say, hey, can someone find a sentence on this page and tell me why it's a sentence? Oh, you want to read sentence number 1? Nick runs to get a sack. How do you know it's a sentence? Oh, it has a who and it has a did what. There you go. Okay. Activity number 3 is adding the receiver of the action, what we know to be the direct object. So we're not going to use that word. We're going to explain that. Well, you'll see through the steps. So again, back to the teacher guide. You see now we're using template C. There's template C. So we're going to take all this knowledge, the who and the did what, and we're going to start adding words. And we're telling students, and there's number 2, turn to page 8 and have the students read the first sentence. The kids lugged the sack in to see the vet. Ask students to identify the who and did what, and you're going to write that down. And then you're going to ask a question. Lugged what? Returning to this text to find out what the answer is. And yes, it's the sack. So even that's adding to that layer of visualizing. The kids are lugging something. And of course, lug is a vocabulary word in this story that needs to be pre-taught. But lugged what? The sack. So now they're remembering, oh, yes, that's the sack that they used to bring in, to put the duck in. And the reason why you see a what and a whom is that the receiver of the action is not always a what. And you can see on page 5, step number 5, turning to page 1, and tell the students that sometimes a person receives the action. There's page 1. Sometimes the person receives the action. Have a student read the second sentence and ask, Nick tags Meg, like tags what? Meg is not a what. So we have to say tags whom. So we're really starting to teach them the receiver can be a thing, or it can be a what. It can be a what, or it can be a whom. Okay. And these are the activities filled out. And again, through the answer guide, there's more pages that have been identified. And so every book has a different number of sentences that follow this format. And that's one reason why we suggest strongly that as you're, throughout the day, you're also, showing kids how this concept is working in other places, whether it's through listening to a picture book being read, or any other little decodable book they may be reading. So, and this is one last activity. So on the left, you see like what the actual answers are for the steps for activity C, activity 3, template C. But on the right-hand side, you see that those sentences have been mixed up. And there's a lot of research about sentence arranging that helps us to see, like, if kids can rearrange sentences and make sense of them, then that lets us know that they really understand sentence construction. And in this case, we're asking them to rearrange sentences, but then go back to the text to prove whether or not that sentence is true. So it wasn't dad that was lugging the sack. And they have to be able to prove that. That's an opportunity to teach kids, how do you return to text? Because ultimately, they're going to need to do that quite often as they encounter more complex texts and they have to answer questions about it. Or even sharing a discussion among the small group. Did dad lug the sack? Who did? So this is a perfect opportunity to return to the text or to have a discussion. And as we've been saying, the fun part of this whole project is that these concepts can also be applied to listening level comprehension, and that occurs in activity 4, where we're building sentence summaries, which is related to template C, the who, did what, and the receiver of the action, which Tamika is going to show us. But I want you to know that if you're looking at the website, now you're looking for a teacher guide that's right there related to the nonfiction passage, Let's Meet a Veterinarian. And then that's what the teacher guide looks like. And then there's the template. And now we're looking at template D. And Tamika will take us through this part of the lesson. Take it
Thank
away,
you, Jill.
Tamika.
And so here we see the accompanying knowledge building passage for a sick rock. It's called Let's Meet a Veterinarian. And I just wanted to highlight that you're going to go paragraph by paragraph with your students and have them identify the who, the did what, and the direct object. So let's take a look at that first paragraph together. Oh, actually, I think you can skip ahead.
There you go.
Yeah. So you're going to reread that first paragraph aloud and have your students identify the who in the paragraph, and brainstorm some possible answers and list student responses. Then you're going to uh, select the answer for the who. So you can give them a list of like, well, is it you? Is it vets? Is it pets? They. And of course, students should accurately identify that the who in the first paragraph, of course, would be vets.
Yes, and so when you read that paragraph out loud and you're encouraging them, listen carefully for the who's, then they'll share with you, oh yes, I remember a you, I remember the vets, I remember the pets, I remember the they. And then the next step is to identify the one that's the most important.
And then after they do that, students are then going to follow up with identifying the did what. That's going to be the next step. And so, again, you're going to want to brainstorm some possible answers, help, take care of, learn. And of course, they should identify that vets take care of um, animals. So that brings us to the final part of this sentence that direct object, the what or the whom. So you're going to want to guide them and ask them, okay, vets take care of what? Vets take care of whom? To create another brainstorm, possible answers, and they'll identify that vets take care of animals. So with those pieces, they can then construct a full sentence summarizing an important part of the main idea of this knowledge building text.
Beautiful.
And then you're going to repeat steps 3 to 6, paragraph by paragraph, with the remainder of the article so that students can complete the full template. And here we see an example of what the full completed template can look like based on that knowledge building passage.
Yes, and there's another step asking, like, what is this passage mostly about? And now they get to go through the 4 important sentences that they've constructed and find what are we learning mostly about this passage. And it's that vets help animals. So you can see that through teaching the syntax components, we're also able to help kids determine what's most important in a paragraph without saying, let's find the main idea, because the main idea actually is what's the most important concept, but that's kind of hard for kids to know what does main idea mean. So this is a very student-friendly way of helping kids learn how to organize their thinking and find topics.
Exactly. And so we also wanted to make it easier for you after watching this webinar and having access to these amazing resources to just jump right in and use them with your students. So here we see a sample weekly schedule. So let's say, for example, you start out with reading the first half of A Sick Rock on day 1, and then you're going to lead your students in the word sort using template A. And then for the second day, you can read the second half of that whole phonics decodable and then transition over into template B. So once they complete the sort, pulling those components to start drafting those sentences. By the third day, because we do recommend spending about 3 days on each of the whole phonics decodables, you can either finish the decodable or reread and lead your students to adding in the receiver of the action by completing template C. And from there, you can, on day 4, then have students read that knowledge building or listen to that knowledge building passage, and they're going to complete template D. So those similar components in template C, but of course for the nonfiction passage. And then finally on day 5, that's a great opportunity to review those texts that you've read with your students throughout the week and catch up on those templates if you weren't able to complete templates B, C, or D. And just a reminder, each decodable has an accompanying knowledge building passage and step read.
Thank you, Tamika. Speaking of step reads, let's look at them. Tamika knows this is very important to me because there's research that shows if you've listened about a topic, there's more there's a higher chance that you'll be able to read about it because it's part of your background knowledge and you've heard the vocabulary. So with that in mind, we've created what we call more decodable passages, which are the step reads that in which we're trying to use as many level 2 words as possible. So for example, here you'll see when you're sick on the left-hand side, the main passage. When you're sick, you may visit a doctor, but where do pets go when they're sick? Even though they can read the word pets, we wanted to get another CK word in there because this is the phonetic uh, focus of level 2, this unit 1 book. When a dog, cat, or duck is sick, they see a vet. So, and you can see how much more simple those passages are and more decodable. So you can find them when you're looking at the main passage. It says step reads at the top, and that's how you find them. Okay. And Nancy's going to share a little bit more with us about the research behind all of this work.
Thank you, Jill. What sort of just circle back to a couple points that have been made and just reiterate them. One is this particular quote underscores the importance of or the predictive contribution of arranging a student's ability to rearrange words into their correct sentence sequence is predictive of their comprehension down the line and their understanding of text. The next slide tells us that teaching students to write, writing about what we're working on is also important. And there was a meta-analysis that Graham and Hebert did back in 2010. And one of the things that surfaced there was writing about what you're reading, and we're doing that by writing a sentence about what we've read, improves comprehension. The other important point that the meta-analysis revealed was that working on sentence construction also improves fluency. And why, when we talk about fluency here, we're not talking about speed and accuracy, but we are talking about prosody, which is that aspect of reading that indicates that we're grouping words into meaningful chunks and working on and understanding how a sentence works helps contribute to prosody, which contributes to comprehension. And then we've already said this, but I think it warrants a repeating, is that we want to start this process early, and that meaning-focused instruction is important early on. In fact, we've tended to focus on meaning later, but put here, we've had a missed opportunity by doing that. And I would argue, having been in the field for decades now, that our overemphasis on any one aspect of reading, either decoding or comprehension, tends to not be desirable. And we are seeing some of the consequence of that by students struggling to understand what they're reading when they get to third and fourth grade because we haven't laid the groundwork, which is one of the goals of this project, which is to help move forward both decoding and meaning concurrently. And I think we have one more slide. Yes. So just one last idea, and we've already mentioned this a couple of times in different ways, but in contrast to decoding, which we tend, at least in the early grades, to relegate to the English language arts block, and we control what we're doing. Syntax, in contrast, can be woven in at any point. It's less constrained by a scope and sequence as the code is. And so we could talk about the who's, what's, and did what's in science, in social studies, even in math, And I think that that repetition, that oral language, even it doesn't all have to be written down, but that oral language practice is enormously helpful, especially as we think about meeting the needs of our multi-language learners. So syntax is very different than the code building process, and we're advocating working on them concurrently.
Thank you, Nancy.
All right, so I just want to walk you through how you can find everything that you need in order to use these amazing resources with your students. You'll head over to readworks.org, and if you don't already have an account, it's a free account. All you have to do is register to access these resources. So you'll click on that sign up for your free account button, or you can log into your teacher account. And from there, on the home page, on the top blue bar, you'll see alignments. You're going to go ahead and click there. And then you're going to select the whole phonics scope and sequence from the list of alignments. And that's going to take you to a page where you'll see level 1, the animal kingdom, and level 2 in our community. So go ahead and click on level 2. On the top of this page, you're going to see some really helpful resources to help you get started. As I mentioned before, there are also general templates available for fiction, nonfiction text. You'll be able to access those in this top section as well. All right, and we want to thank you for joining us today for this live replay. There are questions that are probably being answered in the Ask a Question section on the right side of your screen. So I know that the moderators are taking care of that. But if any other questions come up for you, we are giving you our contact information. So feel free to reach out. And thank you so much, Nancy and Jill, for your thought leadership and for just your collaborative energy and everything that you've brought to bringing this to life. It's truly been a pleasure.
Well, now I'm going to start choking, so I want to say a quick thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, get some water, take a break.
I'd like to say thank you to Tamika and for all the ways you've helped us with this project. You kept us moving along. You created a gorgeous website. You were our cheerleader, and you were so smart about what, what do we want to do that makes the most sense for teachers. So I really appreciate that. And of course, Nancy, oh goodness, where do I begin? But let's begin with your syntax book, which is a wonderfully inspiring a collection of activities that guided the creation of this project. So thank you so much for your wisdom and for sharing and for the way you care about teachers and kids.
Thank you. Thank you to ReadWorks for being open to this idea several years back, and to Jill for her creative decodables, which has really opened the world of reading to so many children. So thank you.
We're happy to
Right.
answer questions anytime. So let's do that.
Thank you.